See, if you hope hard enough, things do happen. Senator Hollie Hughes is a Liberal for New South Wales, and we've got her out of more serious business to speak with us on TNT Radio. Hollie, welcome.
Afternoon, Smithy.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, fantastic. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he hopes to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in India next month as the federal government ramps up, or re-ramps, I guess, its foreign aid policy. Today, the government has released its new overseas development policy, which seeks to basically bribe countries in the Pacific and Southeast Asia to avoid Beijing's Belt and Road initiatives. They're a little bit late to the party. Will it work?
Well, I think what's also really concerning in what they're proposing in these new frameworks that they've put out is a lot of imposing of morals and values that aren't necessarily held by some of these nations. So it really is, it's pushing a higher morality clause on the nations that we have traditionally supported. An example of that, Papua New Guinea, homosexuality is legal, but part of this new platform is anti-homophobia. Now, in Australia, we're very proud that we don't have a homophobic society. We've moved certainly a long way away from that. But they're not necessarily what is held by a lot of our nearby neighbours as their values. So I think we do need to be careful here when it comes out, it comes about putting out carve-outs of aid that'll be available or projects countries will be eligible for based on sort of climate change, gender equality, these sorts of initiatives that may or may not line up with their own value system. And, there is a part of diplomacy that is, trying to move nations closer and in alignment to our values, and that's sort of the soft diplomacy that comes with it. But I think we have to be careful that it is done in a soft way as opposed to sort of coming down with a hammer on countries like PNG and saying, well, unless you adopt sort of this very broad anti-homophobia sentiment, we're not going to provide aid. I don't see how that's going to help limit China's access into Belt and Road.
I don't see how it would change the relationship between the Solomon Islands and China because they are so ensconced in the Chinese way of doing things to the degree where the island security is now run by the Chinese. And they'll need to do a lot more than make demands on the Solomon Islands.
Well, the WTO case has been removed that we initiated against China when it looked at barley and wine and a number of our commodities that China had blocked us from exporting them to them. And, of course, the Labor government's now just removed that WTO case, and that's now seeing a sort of a frosting of relationships. But at what price is this Labor government prepared to pay in its bid to buddy up with Beijing? I think we've still got a long way to go on that.
Yeah, a long way to go, all right. A leading legal academic, Queensland Emeritus Law Professor Suri Ratnapalas, has blasted proposed misinformation legislation as a licence to censor, calling the bill vague and saying it would inevitably stifle political debate and reinforce foreign influence on Australia's information space. I think he is dead right. It's an appalling overreach. What do they take, social media for? They're not scientific journals, Hollie. They are public. They are public online platforms where we can have a say and have an opinion.
And having the ability, freedom of speech is a fundamental right to our democracy. It's such a critical part of just every democracy. And this is just an incredibly bad bill that the government should just rip up. It's incredible. And the definition that they're trying to produce around misinformation is incredibly broad. And this risks capturing a whole lot of things that lots of people consider to be incredibly legitimate content. So, we need people to be able to say what they want to in a free and democratic society. And I mean, free speech isn't free of consequence for that speech, but it's important that you do have the ability to speak freely about whatever you choose to do so. I think this will see the big social media giant do a lot of self-censorship of content. and this is, to try and avoid penalties. But this is going to just stifle debate in this country. And if you look back, put yourself back in the pandemic, if these sorts of things were around, anyone who suggested that the COVID came from a lab leak in Wuhan would have been dismissed out of hand as propagating misinformation. And it now turns out that, and it's looking more and more likely, and there's more and more experts coming to the table saying, well, yeah, and there's a lot of scientists being found out that was their original thoughts and then moved away from it, not based on anything scientific. So, that's a very practical example of what this could do, and it puts a huge amount of power in a regulator. The ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, would have all the power to decide something that was misinformation. They would be the Ministry of Truth, in effect. And, that is just a completely unbelievable prospect in this day and age. But this Labor government hasn't found a human right in Australia they don't want to impinge upon.
That's right. That's true. I want to get quickly to Shane Drumgold, the now resigned Director of Public Prosecutions in the ACT, the man who did all he could to try and convict Bruce Lerman of rape, despite police recommending that no charges should be laid. Former Defence Minister Linda Reynolds has criticised Drumgold for pursuing his personal crusade for social justice. Maybe we're starting to get to the nub of this case after all, Hollie.
Well, I'd be interested if Mr Drumgold takes all of this on his own. Where was he getting his information? Who was talking to him that this would be a very good idea to continue to pursue? It seems extraordinary. This is the guy who called for the inquiry. Talk about an own goal. He's the one that demanded the inquiry into the AFP, and there was a big political pressure and a political conspiracy somehow working against this prosecution. And it turns out that it looks like it was all on the other foot.
Yeah.
So if he was so convinced there was political pressure, maybe he was getting some himself, so just assumed it was everywhere else.
Interesting.
But the fact that this ACT government is now trying to lay some blame at the judge who conducted the inquiry, Walter Sofronoff's feet, over the report coming out before they deemed it appropriate, or the report came out in full because they hadn't had a chance to redact findings yet, it is an absolute unbelievable display of arrogance.
Yeah.
If you're staring down this is a state or territory government staring down the barrel of their entire justice system being discredited, and, they're shooting the messenger, in effect. It's just extraordinary.
It is.
I don't think Shane Drumgold should have been allowed to resign. I think he should have been sacked. I think that was the first mistake they made. And I like all the cries now that natural justice and due process. Well, he didn't certainly show much of that to Bruce Lehrman. And, taxpayers in Canberra are about to pay an almighty whack, I think, to Bruce Lehrman for this relentless pursuit of him, what appears to be a social justice warrior on a crusade.
Yeah, how ironic, eh? You're exactly right. It was a kangaroo court led by the prosecution, not by the trial judge, by the prosecution, a kangaroo court in every way possible, with information that should have been presented to the defence withheld, including the fact that the police didn't want to charge Lerman at all. So all of this was going on, and now he has the temerity, the Director of Public Prosecutions, now that he's resigned, the temerity to call on Sofronoff, who's put the review together, that he has somehow, impinged on judicial, governance by releasing the report early. Talk about hypocritical. Give me a break.
Well, deliberately misleading the judge with the contemporaneous note around Lisa Wilkinson. And now he's saying, that this is somehow affecting, the way that this procedurally should have been handled. There isn't a barrister, a legal professional who hasn't said that misleading the judge when it came to an alleged contemporaneous note, which was nothing of the sort, was not the most egregious of legal behaviour. Yeah. And here he is. They've obviously got no shame, these people. It's extraordinary.
No, it is. Two quick ones and two lighter ones. How ironic is this? Zoom, the company which made a mozza out of working from home, has now asked all employees within 80 kilometres of an office to work in person again, come into the workplace. We still have federal public servants refusing to come into work in Canberra and elsewhere, don't we?
Look, absolutely. And I have a rule in my office. It's only in very, very extreme circumstances will I do Zoom meetings. I am just not a fan of them. And I get particularly cranky when I travel to wherever I am in Australia for inquiries. And the whole point of us travelling is we go to cities, and sometimes we go to quite remote areas to enable people to give us evidence in person. And then we turn up and someone's on a video link, and it's like, hang on, I've just spent time and I'm away from my home, my family, my office to hear your evidence, and people decide to just dial it in. And so, it's got to stop. The pandemic's over. You'd certainly, in my job, and I'm sure it's the same in lots of people's jobs, you don't get the same interaction. You don't get the ability to see the body language, see the reaction, see how things are progressing through. And, we all know, you're on mute, sort of.
Yes, it's a pain in the neck.
They're horrible things. And Zoom's probably realised, whilst it's a great tool, if required, for them to effectively run their actual business, they need their staff in the office. And they need their staff that are probably the sales team, etc., out talking to customers, not talking to them via their platform.
Pressing the flesh.
Absolutely.
One last one. How good were those Matildas against Denmark last night? So
good. I got to say, I'm not someone who looks for sport on TV. I watch a rugby match. I do like the Wallabies because I'm obviously a glutton for punishment. But I have just enjoyed watching the Matildas and the soccer so much. It's just been fantastic. And I really do hope that this sort of continues to breed the enthusiasm for the sport, particularly for the girls, and to see more women's sport get promoted in such a positive light, because the girls are fantastic.
Yeah. My two 7-year-olds.
It's just as tough.
Yes, it is. Of course it is.
When the boys play.
Yeah. I was sitting there last night, and my two 7-year-olds are sitting on the couch, and they've got their Wallabies scarves on, and they know all the girls' names, and they think they know more about the game than those who were playing it, right? And you should just hear them commentate and say, why didn't you go do that? Go to that gap, kick the ball back. It's just hilarious. And if inspiration is any guide, FIFA inspiration, they are going to pursue the game of football for many, many years to come, which is great.
It's lovely. It's wonderful to see. And it's just such a nice thing for all Australians. We've got cost of living pressures. We've got the nation being ripped apart by this voice that's being proposed. And to have something that sort of seems to be unifying people and making them feel good as Australians, I think is a really lovely thing, because we need a bit of that at the moment.
Very true. I'll leave you with all of that. You get back to do something more important. Thank you so much for your time.
I'll talk to you soon.